This year in 2024, I worked on a really fun project arranging 12 kids' pop songs for orchestra. In this video, I'm going to show you how I did this and go into detail about some of my arranging and orchestration choices. Loopy Tunes are an amazing songwriting duo with a large following here on YouTube creating music for kids. They regularly perform live shows around New Zealand and are fantastic and confident performers. Loopy Tunes write their songs in 3 languages: English, Samoan and Te Reo Māori, the language of the Indigenous people of New Zealand. The duo of Leah and Seal chose the songs and created this matariki show for a concert with the Christchurch Symphony Orchestra, the professional orchestra of my hometown, Christchurch, New Zealand. They're an amazing orchestra who serve the region with a variety of music and community programs. The orchestra hired me to provide arrangements for these concerts. Now, if you don't live in New Zealand, you probably don't know what matariki is. Matariki is the Māori name for the cluster of stars also known as the Pleiades. It rises in midwinter and for many Māori, it heralds the start of a new year. For this concert we had an amazing conductor, Ingrid Martin, who really embraced the music and got into the spirit of the show. One of the challenges of this project was to take music that was written for voice and guitar, or ukulele, and arrange it for orchestra. There is some magic orchestral music that mimics a strumming guitar, but I didn't want to rely on those techniques alone as I had to arrange 12 songs and I'd need to keep some variety throughout the show. For this gig, Loopy Tunes would be performing without their instruments so they could focus on the performance in the concerts. In discussion with orchestra management, we also made the choice not to have a rhythm section performing with the orchestra. I didn't want the orchestra to act as colours or pads with a combo essentially playing the songs. I wanted to exploit the possibilities of the orchestra through texture, timbre, rhythm and colour to showcase the themes and subjects of each song. Throughout the video, I'll show you some key ways I dealt with this challenge. The instrumentation was for chamber orchestra with the Loopy Tunes duo on microphones. All the scores shown are in concert. In Toro like a Kakīroa, stretched like a giraffe, I used the percussion section to provide the rhythmic drive that the guitar usually would, and used the tuba and bass clarinet to provide the harmonic foundation. The harp provided some chords at the start and throughout. One of the fun things about the song is that the different animals are featured in each verse, so this gave me a nice opportunity to creatively interpret some animal sounds or actions. For instance, in the first verse we have stretched like a giraffe, so I thought some trombone glissandos upwards might be really fun. I doubled this with the viola and cello and added some pizzicato to the violins just to add some definition. Here's what that sounds like without the singers. The second verse is stomp like an elephant, arefana, so I have some nice heavy figures in the brass and low strings, then I accent it with the timpani. The third verse is jump like a rabbit, rapati. So I have some nice leaping gestures in the trumpet and oboe. This time the piccolo, flute and harp provide the accents. Note how I keep a lot of these figures clear of the vocal melody. The next verse is manu, bird. So I used the piccolo and violin trills with support from the flute. The following verse is noke, worm, so I use a slithering unison bass clarinet and tuba melody.
Can you be a worm? Cody, Cody, like a monkey. Wriggle like a worm, it's me. Wriggle, wriggle, wriggle. Cody, Cody, Cody. Wriggle, wriggle, wriggle. Now face together.
and the next verse is spin like a dog, kuri. So I gave the violas, cellos, clarinet and bassoon a winding melody in triplets. The final verse is a dance for all of the animals, so I had an orchestral tutti with a few elements. The winds are playing quick runs for excitement, with different instruments dovetailing in and out of the melody depending on the range. The brass, harp and percussion are providing rhythmic and chordal accompaniment. And finally, I gave the strings and trumpets a melody. Hoea Tō Waka is the traditional tune Row the Boat in Te Reo. This time the rhythmic drive is provided by the percussion, this time playing castanet, snare and suspended cymbal, and the eighth note figures in the winds, horns and strings. It is a delineated type of texture that is typical in the music of Stravinsky. I thought of Stravinsky for this arrangement as the notes I added to the harmony gave it a pantonic sound, and this is often heard in his music. I alternated this type of material between the winds and strings throughout the sections of the arrangement. In the first iteration of the melody, I have the trumpet support the vocal line with a couple of unison horns on a subtle counter melody. In the second time through the melody, I have winds alternating to provide the rhythmic drive. The oboes and clarinet alternate with the flutes, bass clarinet and bassoon. The accompanying melodies are thickened slightly by having the trumpets and the horns on the melody in octaves, and the trombone and violas and cellos on the counter melody. Then at this point in the song, the weather gets stormy and a big wave comes, so it's a great chance to borrow a wave from Ravel. The strings play rising tremolos until the climax, where the melodies work their way down quickly. The brass, percussion and timpani provide some atmosphere. The arrangement continues and speeds up at the end. I changed some of the figures, making them easier to play at a faster tempo. And I increased the rate of change in the textures, alternating every 2 beats between flutes and violins, and clarinet, bass clarinet, bassoon and violas. The percussion, harp, timpani, tuba, cellos and basses playing pizzicato provide the foundation. It ends with a nice wind flurry and a strong 5-1. If the score looks a little messy, it's because I tried to compress it onto the page as much as possible to make it easier for you to read. It was more spacious and legible in the final score. Kā Pū Tohorā is a song about whale spotting, and that got me thinking, there's lots of good music about the sea. Then I remembered the beautiful sound of Mendelssohn's Fingal's Cave, so I borrowed the theme for the main element of this arrangement, changing the harmony to match the song. This arrangement has more of an orchestral feel, and the selection of percussion instruments reflects that. I utilised triangle, tambourine, and suspended cymbal. It is half the speed of the original, so it has quite a different feel. But one advantage of this is that when the feel changes to the chorus, it inserts a lot of energy for the Kā Pū parts. In the chorus, I borrowed some Ravel-like textures, where I wrote some small wave figures that culminate on beat 4 between the singer's phrases. Each of these waves has a small ripple that follows it. To create each wave, I alternated between the strings and the winds. The strings play repeated 16th notes, which creates excitement, and they play a pizzicato chord on the beat 4 along with the winds, harp, percussion and brass. Then trill-like figures in the wind, with horns, timpani and a harp gliss, act as the dissipation of the wave. Here it is without the singers. Then I alternate them. The winds provide the rising wave, and the strings answer. Note that I have the winds playing a rising scale rather than the repeated notes like the strings do. This is more idiomatic and sounds better than fast repeated notes in the woodwinds. The bass pits and tuba provide rhythmic drive. Well, I hope you enjoyed that detailed look at some of my arranging and orchestration for this awesome project with the CSO and Loopy Tunes. Thanks so much to Loopy Tunes, the Christchurch Symphony Orchestra and conductor Ingrid Martin for their amazing work. It was a pleasure to be a part of it. If you've got any questions, leave them in the comments down below.